Earlier, I told you that Docker Compose is built on top of Docker Engine. So everything we have done with Docker Engine, like building images, listing them, starting containers, and so on, all of these operations are also available using Docker Compose. Let me show you. So we type Docker Compose without any arguments, enter. Look, we have all these subcommands, like we have rm for removing stopped containers, we have run, we have push, pull, and so on. The difference is that any of these commands will apply to our application as a whole. So most of these commands will impact multiple services or multiple containers in our application. So let's look at Docker Compose build and also use the help option. So we have a bunch of options here. A couple of them I want to point out that are useful to know is no cache. With this, we can prevent caching when building the image. Sometimes you encounter weird issues and you want to make sure that cache is not used. In that case, you use this option. Another useful option is --pull. With this, we can always pull a newer version of the image. That is also good to know. So in this lesson, I'm not going to use any of these. We're just going to run Docker Compose build. This built our web and API services. And as you noticed, our build was super fast because pretty much everything came from the cache. So let's run Docker images. So I have 5 images on this machine: Vidly frontend, Vidly web, Vidly API, Vidly backend, and Mongo. Mongo obviously came from Docker Hub. Now, as part of this build process in this lesson, we built Vidly web and Vidly API. These 2 other images, Vidly frontend and backend, were built when we started this application earlier. So back to our project. In this original compose file that I included in this project, look, I called these services frontend and backend instead of web and API. That is why we have these 2 images, Vidly frontend and Vidly backend. Also, as you have noticed, when building images with Docker Compose, our images are prefixed with the name of our application. Now, where does this come from? It is the name of the directory. So currently we are inside a directory called Vidly, and that is why all these images are prefixed with Vidly. I think this is a great convention. Now I got a question for you. If you look at the created column, you can see all these images were created an hour ago. But didn't we just build the web and API images? Why do you think this happened? Here's the answer. Because I built these images, frontend and backend, an hour ago when I was recording the first lesson in this section. Now, when building these new images, Docker used everything in the cache because all those files were already available, all those layers were there. So Docker didn't have to do a full rebuild. That is why we are still using the build from an hour ago, okay? Now, if you want to force a full rebuild, we can say Docker Compose build -- no cache. All right, this is going to take a few seconds, so I'll be right back. All right, our images are built. So let's run Docker images. There you go. Look at the first 2 images, API and web, were built less than a minute ago. So that's all about building images. Next, we're going to talk about starting the application.